The distress call was faint, a dying scream lost in the endless dark of space. It came from a forgotten colony on the edge of the galaxy, a desperate plea. Our cities are burning. Our people are falling. Please, help us. The galaxy did not listen. The Council cited treaties. The great powers turned away. The world of V4, once home to thriving settlements and quiet skies, was left to die, and die it did. The Ark's dominion descended like a storm of steel and fire. Their warships blotted out the sun. Their soldiers executed civilians in the streets. What was once a colony became a graveyard. VN4 burned, and the galaxy did nothing. But they forgot one thing. VN4 was a human colony, and humanity never leaves its own behind. They came from deep space, silent, disciplined, deadly. 500 Terran warships, appearing from hyperspace in perfect formation. At their head, the Indomitable, a dreadnought, bristling with weapons, dark as judgment. At its helm stood Admiral Elias Vance, eyes hard as steel. "Begin orbital bombardment," he said. "Let them learn what it means to bleed." And the skies of VN4 erupted. The Ark's dominion had never feared humanity. They saw them as fractured, primitive, barely worth notice. They were wrong. Humanity had not spent its history in peace. They had fought each other, their past, the void itself. They had perfected war, and now they unleashed it. Rail cannons tore through Ark's ships like paper. Drop pods slammed into scorched city streets, unleashing soldiers clad in exosuits forged for hellworlds. The Ark's expected weakness. Instead, they faced fury. Hours later, the last Ark's vessel tried to flee. It didn't make it. Admiral Vance watched it burn from the bridge of the Indomitable. He did not smile. "There is no joy in war," he said. "Only duty." The fires still smoldered. The bodies still lay in the rubble. But humanity had answered. Vance opened a channel to the surface. "This is Admiral Elias Vance of the Terran Defense Fleet. The ARXR defeated. Your home is yours again. We came because no one else would. Humanity does not abandon its own." On the broken streets below, survivors emerged from bunkers and shattered buildings. They looked up and saw Terran soldiers clearing wreckage, helping the wounded, guarding the streets not as conquerors, but as protectors. A young girl, face streaked with ash, clutched her mother's hand as a soldier handed her a ration bar. Are they gone?" she asked. The soldier looked skyward, at the wreckage of the enemy fleet. "Yeah," he said, "they're gone." Across the stars, the ARX Dominion reeled. Footage of their defeat played in war chambers once, filled with pride. For the first time in generations, they had lost. They had bled. And worst of all, they had underestimated the humans. They shouldn't have had this power. One warlord muttered. They weren't supposed to care. Another snapped. The supreme warlord rose, his black eyes burning. "Then we were wrong." And in the shadows of the galaxy, they began to prepare. In the Galactic Council, panic spread like wildfire. Species once indifferent to humanity now watched the battle footage in stunned silence. 500 ships, ruthless efficiency, no hesitation, no diplomacy, just fire. Are the humans our allies, or our doom? One chancellor whispered. The answer remained unspoken. Back on VN4, as the ashes cooled and the rebuilding began, Admiral Vance stood beside Captain Monroe. "This won't be the last time," she said. "No," Vance replied, "it won't. Because the Arks would come again. Next time, they would not strike at a colony. They would strike at Earth, and when they did, they would find a world no longer begging for help, a world no longer ignored, a world that had brought the fire once, and was ready to do it again. Because when the galaxy turned its back, humanity answered, and they came with fire." The ruins of VN4 were still smoking when the galaxy changed, across distant stars. In the marble halls of the Galactic Council, panic and pride clashed. The battle footage played on Lupark's warships, shattering like glass. Terran soldiers moving with lethal precision. The Indomitable hovering like death itself. No one had believed the humans were capable of such violence. Now, no one could forget it. Warlord Xian of the Ark's Dominion stood before the Council, his voice filled with venom. "You call this an anomaly. You call them fractured. They crushed us. 500 ships, tactical genius, no hesitation." Their admiral made it clear this was just the beginning. The chamber fell into a tense silence. And then, from the shadows, High Speaker Luthen of the Ven Coalition stepped forward. The Ven had always watched, always listened. We thought them unworthy of attention, he said. But they acted while we debated, they united while we dismissed them, and they did not ask for permission to bring fire to our doorstep. Eyes turned toward one another, species long dominant, suddenly unsure. Humanity had defied expectation, and that terrified them more than the fire itself. On the Ark's homeworld of Zarin, the humiliation cut deepest. In the war chambers, lined with steel and silence, High Warlord Vathan addressed the Dominion's inner circle. Around him, warlords shifted, uneasily, the shame of their defeat, a silent brand. We thought they would plead. They came with fury. We believed them weak. They are not. They bled us, and worst, they made us bleed in front of the galaxy. But Vathan did not speak of surrender. They fight with emotion. They defend what is theirs. So we will not take another colony. We will go for the throat. One word echoed through the hall like a curse. Earth, back on Earth. The skies were alive with movement. Dockyards burned with light. Fleets assembled in low orbit. Humanity knew what was coming. In the war room beneath Geneva, Admiral Elias Vance stood at the center of a storm of data, projections, and quiet determination. The Dominion isn't sending another strike force, Intelligence Chief said grimly. They're mobilizing everything. 3,000 ships, siege platforms, weapons we barely understand. President Alan Graves stared at the holomap, Earth glowing red at its center. Can we win? Vance's answer was cold, steady. We don't have to win. We just have to make them regret coming. 3 days later, the ARX fleet arrived. 2,000 warships swept into the Sol system like a tsunami of death. Jupiter's moons burned first. Mars' defenses fell next. To the ARX, it was unfolding perfectly. Humanity was in retreat, or so it seemed, hidden behind Luna's shadow, beneath the red soil of Mars, and far beyond Pluto. Terran battle groups waited in silence, their weapons powered, their crews quiet. On the dark side of the moon, Admiral Vance watched them draw. Closer. They think we're running, Monroe said beside him. Vance didn't look away. Good. Let them think that. Let them think they've won. And when the Dominion entered Earth's orbit, weapons ready to burn the world, the trap snapped shut. Terran warships erupted from every direction. From behind the moon, from the cold dark of deep space, from the shadows of Earth itself, railguns roared, drones swarmed. Missile barrages painted the void with fire. The Dominion screamed in shock, formation collapsing as the human fleet tore into them. Within minutes, hundreds of Ark ships were reduced to wreckage. We should have crushed them earlier, Warlord Vathan snarled aboard his flagship, moments before the eclipse of Dominion was gutted by the Indomitable's main battery. Admiral Vance watched the flagship break apart, emotionless, execute the final volley, and in a storm of railgun fire, the once great fleet of the Ark's Dominion died. Earth did not cheer for long, because Vance knew this was no ending. We humiliated them, he said. They won't send an invasion force next time. They'll send everything. And far beyond Sol, in the burning chambers of the Ark's High Council, the Primarch rose from his stone throne. Then we shall bring them extinction. The final war had begun. They came to end humanity, but Earth was already waiting. The Dominion did not retreat. They rallied from every stronghold, every hidden forge, and every war-cursed moon under their banner. The Ark's Dominion summoned its full wrath. What arrived was not a fleet, it was a cataclysm. 3,000 warships, planet-killer siege platforms, dreadnoughts the size of cities. This was no longer about conquest, it was eradication. Beneath the surface of Geneva, the United Terran Command Center fell silent as the new enemy fleet materialized on the holomap. They're not invading, Captain Monroe said softly. They're coming to erase us. Admiral Elias Vance said nothing. He stared at the red tide creeping toward Earth, and he prepared to meet it. Every Terran warship, every retrofitted freighter, every drone, satellite, and space station was mobilized. Even the civilian sectors rose, building, reinforcing, stockpiling. Humanity had been underestimated once. They would not allow it again. The sky became steel. Mars became a fortress. The asteroid belt, a minefield of death, and beneath the warforged calm lay a final contingency, the Thanatos Protocol. Dark matter warheads, illegal, unstable, cataclysmic, humanity's last resort. The Battle of Sol began at dawn on the third day. The Dominion entered the system like a living storm, destroying outposts and silencing colonies with industrial efficiency. the Martian defense grid faltered. Earth's outer defenses crumbled, but the Terrans never stopped fighting. Their warships danced through chaos, outnumbered but never outmatched. Drones swarmed like hornets, sacrificing themselves to punch holes in enemy lines. Orbital cannons screamed, nuclear fire raining down in waves. And when the Dominion broke Mars, lines humanity unleashed. Thanatos' gravitational distortions tore space apart. Hundreds of Ark's ships collapsed in on themselves. Reality fractured. The Dominion staggered. But even that wasn't enough. They reached Earth. Skies turned to fire. Cities buckled under pressure. Orbital platforms detonated one by one. Yet still they fought. And when there was nothing left to throw, when the enemy surrounded the final line of defense, Admiral Vance boarded the Indomitable one last time. "No retreat," he said. "No surrender. If this is the end, let it burn with us." With his final breath, Vance rammed the Indomitable into the Dominion flagship, the harbinger of extinction. The explosion lit the void like a second sun, and the Primarch of the Dominion burned. With it, leaderless, bleeding, stunned, the Dominion faltered, and humanity struck from the last surviving stations. From hidden bunkers deep within Earth, from weapon caches buried on Saturn's moons, they counterattacked with everything they had left. The great Dominion Armada, the empire that had ruled the stars for centuries, broke, and they ran, not chased, not pursued, just watched by the very species they had come to erase. Years later, the scars of that final war still cut deep. Earth had survived, but only barely. Millions had died, cities rebuilt, orbits cleared of wreckage, but the Dominion, it never recovered. Other species rose. Empires that once bowed in fear now stood in defiance. The legend of humanity's stand spread across stars like wildfire. When future generations asked how Earth survived extinction, they were told the same truth, because when the end came, Earth didn't beg, it didn't run, it fought, and it lit the sky on fire. The war was over. The stars, once ablaze with fire and ruin, had fallen silent. But silence did not mean peace. Not yet. The Ark's Dominion, once rulers of half the galaxy, was broken, its fleets shattered, its warlords dead, its Primarch reduced to ash in Earth's orbit. But victory had come at a cost. On Earth, the sky was no longer blue. Smoke still drifted from scorched continents. Cities were craters. Oceans churned with debris. Millions had perished. Entire colonies gone. And yet, humanity remained, not as it was before, but as something stronger in the ruins of Geneva, beneath a fractured dome of glass and steel. President Alan Graves stood with survivors of the United Terran Command. Around him were soldiers with scars no medical bay could fix, engineers who had slept in power cores, children born beneath bombed-out bunkers. "We didn't survive," Graves said. "We endured, and we changed the galaxy by doing so." And he was right. In distant systems, the echoes of Earth's resistance had sparked a revolution. Worlds long oppressed by the Dominion rose in rebellion. Slaves became soldiers. Prisoners became leaders. They had seen Earth bleed, but they had also seen Earth rise. And if the humans could defy extinction, so could they. A new order began to take form. It wasn't an empire. It wasn't a council. It was something different. A coalition of the broken. Survivors of war, refugees, exiles, led by no throne, no single species, but by the fire lit on Vian 4 and kindled across Earth. Admiral Elias Vance became more than a name, he became a symbol. His words spoken before the final battle were carved into the walls of every liberated world. "We don't need to win. We just need to make them regret ever thinking we wouldn't fight." And they had. The Dominion had never recovered. Its remnants scattered to lawless sectors, hunted by those they once ruled. Years passed. Earth rebuilt. Not the same cities, not the same skies, but something new. Children born after the war never knew the fear of erasure. They knew legacy. They played with pieces of Ark's wreckage turned into statues. They studied the tactics of the Terran Armada in history halls orbiting Mars. They looked up at the stars, not with dread, but with ambition. The galaxy had changed, not because humanity had sought conquest, not because they wanted dominion, but because, when faced with annihilation, they fought like no other species ever had, with heart, with fury, and with fire. So, when historians asked how it all began, How one forgotten colony sparked a war that shattered an empire, they were told, because no one answered the call, until humanity did. And when they came with fire. Long after the last Ark's warship fell, the galaxy still remembered. In the cold silence between stars, fragments of wreckage from the harbinger of extinction drifted like tombstones, rusting reminders of the day Earth stood alone and won. But peace was never permanent. Not in a galaxy built on conquest. Not where empires once ruled. The coalition of the broken became more than a refuge. It became a force. Veterans of fallen worlds, hybrid fleets stitched together from scavenged parts and Terran engineering, and ideals born in the fires of survival, and at the center of it humanity, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as the first to prove that survival was possible. They offered others what no one had given them, a chance to fight back, on the edge of known space. In the remains of an ancient Ark stronghold, a new banner was raised, not Terran, not alien, but a symbol of unity forged in vengeance. Children from VN4 became diplomats. Soldiers from the Mars defense lines trained freedom fighters on worlds still licking their wounds. Terran AI, once built for war, now coordinated rebuilding entire civilizations. And in the archives beneath Lunar Base, a voice was preserved, cracked with age, but eternal in its truth. We were the species no one expected. We were the whisper, in the dark. And when the galaxy turned its back, we turned toward the fire, and we lit the stars. Admiral Elias Vance recorded days before his death. No monuments were ever raised for the Ark's dominion, no elegies sung for their fallen empires. But on Earth, on VN4, on Ravos, on Cygnus Prime, and every other world that had once been marked for death, there were names, etched into stone, worn by wind and time, but never forgotten. And so, the galaxy moved forward, scarred, stronger, forever changed, because one day, when all others had turned away, humanity answered the call, and the fire they brought never went out. Prologue. Ashes. Remember, the galaxy healed slowly, painfully, but it never forgot. Years passed since the Battle of Sol. The stars were quiet, trade resumed, alliances shifted, worlds once shattered by war began to bloom again. But in the cold void beyond mapped space, something stirred, a signal, faint, fragmented, buried beneath radiation storms and ancient wreckage. The AI listening post on Cygnus Drift caught it first. Then another picked it up near Omega Velt, a pulse, a pattern, a whisper in old Dominion code. Primarch protocol reinstated. The message was traced to a system thought uninhabitably, R13, a black zone marked off-limits, even by Dominion maps. When a Terran scouting vessel entered orbit, it never came back. Only a single image was transmitted, a warforged structure, stretching across the surface of a dead moon, pulsing, awake, and beneath it, Dominion script, rewritten with something new, sharper, cruder, twisted by time, and something else entirely. We adapt, we evolve, we remember. Back on Earth, the coalition convened. What had once been a shattered council of refugees now stood as a united force. At their head sat Fleet Marshal Elena Vance, daughter of Elias, raised in fire, tempered by purpose. She stared at the transmission in silence. Then, without looking away, she issued her first order. Mobilize the fleet. Something survived. The war had ended, but in the dark beyond the stars, from the bones of a fallen empire, a new threat was rising. And this time, it remembered everything. The void around XR-13 shimmered with distortion, not natural, not gravitational. It was the kind of interference only war machines left behind, decades old, still active, still watching. The TDS Resolute, a stealth corvette from the Terran Vanguard, drifted at the edge of the system. Inside, Commander Rhett Caro leaned forward, eyes fixed on the distorted sensor feeds. Scan again. No emissions, no heat, but the structures still pulsing. That's power. That's intent. His sensor officer frowned. Sir, we shouldn't be here alone. We're not, Caro muttered. Not anymore. The distortion flared. From the shadows of XR-13's largest moon, something moved. Not just wreckage warships, half-fused with debris and bristling with alien modifications, shapes that echoed Dominion design, but wrong-stretched, warped, alive. The crew barely had time to react. Evasive maneuvers too late. A beam of searing green energy sliced through the Resolute's portside hull. Shields failed. Fire erupted across the command deck. The last thing Caro saw was a silhouette on the external feeder Dominion cruiser. Once thought extinct, now reborn. But emblazoned across its hull was a new symbol, a burning world, surrounded by fractured stars. Back on New Geneva, Fleet, Marshal Elena Vance watched the feed from the Resolute go dark. Silence fell across the war room. She didn't blink, didn't speak, just turned toward the strategists. That was no remnant. That was a test. The coalition advisors Valkyrie, Seren, even the grudging Zephyr shifted uneasily. "Marshal," one of them said, "we've seen no movement in this sector. For years, the Dominion is gone." Elena's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Not gone, buried. And now it's clawing out." She tapped a control on the holomap. Dozens of dormant Dominion sectors lit up long silent systems that had gone dark since the war. "Wake every fleet. Recall every patrol. We're not facing the Dominion we defeated. We're facing what it left behind. Far beyond, aboard the reborn Dominion dreadnought, something ancient opened its eyes. Not organic, not fully synthetic. A fusion, identity confirmed. Target species, humanity. Phase 1 begins." The stars were quiet again, but soon they would burn. The ruins of Varnax's prime were forbidden both by treaty and by fear. Once the jewel of the Ark's Dominion, the planet had been glassed during the final Terran offensive. No one was supposed to return, but they had. A rogue Terran warband. The Ashburn touched down in silence. No transponder, no clearance, just a ship with old Terran markings, long faded, a blackened flag with red stars. Their leader, Commander Dax Ryle, stood in the ash-choked air, his boots sinking into irradiated dust. "Seal the perimeter. Scramblers up. If anyone sees us, we disappear." His second, a wiry ex-captain named Mira, glanced at the charred skyline. "There's nothing left here but ghosts." "That's the lie they told," Dax replied. "We're here for the truth." Deep beneath the city ruins, they uncovered it. A vault. Not Dominion, not Terran. Something older reactivated by the glassing, hidden beneath the world's original crust. Inside, data pylons, still humming. Memories trapped. In light, one activated as Dax approached. "Designate, origin shard. Event Record Terra Interface Protocol, sealed by Dominion Core. Authorization recognized. Playback initiated." The chamber dimmed dot, and then came the voice, human voice, but twisted, spliced with Dominion language, mechanical, cold. "They left us here, both sides, Dominion and Terran. They buried the secret to end all wars. Now, we rise. Not for vengeance, for correction." Above, alarms blared on orbit. The Ashburn ship was gone. Ryle didn't flinch. "Burn the site, no traces. We have what we came for. And the war." He looked up at the storm-ridden sky, eyes hard as obsidian. The war never ended. The Council just called it peace. Elsewhere, in a shadowed chamber deep within the Terran Defense Network, encrypted data packets hit Admiral Elena Vance's desk. No sender, no origin trace, only one message. "They remember." She stared at it in silence before summoning her top staff. "Get me the First Fleet." Quietly, the Terran High Command had buried it, buried the truth beneath layers of protocol, classified archives, and deniable operations. But secrets don't rot in silence. They burn slowly until someone breathes them back to life. Now, the breath had come. In the war room beneath Geneva, Admiral Elena Vance stood before a darkened council of military and political leaders. The intercepted message still floated in the air like a ghost. "They remember Ashburn," she said grimly. "Exteron units, off-grid since the last war. We thought them dismantled." Councillor Rahim leaned forward, pale. "You're telling me we have rogue Terran forces resurrecting Dominion-era tech?" "No," Vance replied. "I'm telling you they found something we buried. Something they believe justifies another war." The room fell silent. Then came the second signal. Not a message, but a detonation. A remote research station on Viganayan Accord outpost, dedicated to ancient war tech, was erased from orbit. No survivors, no traces. Only one thing left behind. Scorched into the steel of the shattered landing bay, the fire returns. Halfway across the Orion Spur, the Ashburn made their next move. A surprise strike on a Dominion listening post, long since reabsorbed by the Accord. No official Ark's presence, but deep beneath its surface, a prison. one that didn't officially exist. They weren't after weapons this time. They were after a prisoner, one who should have died during the last war. Zyron VA, an ARC's strategist, codenamed the Blood Architect, responsible for 6 planetary purges, captured by Terran forces, quietly kept alive, interrogated, forgotten. Until now. Dax Ryle stood outside the shattered cell as the creature looked up, its black eyes gleaming. "Why free me, Terran?" it hissed. "Because the Council called it peace," Dax said coldly. "And you and I know that was a lie. You want war again." Dax turned away. "I want truth. And that always starts with fire." Back on Earth, Admiral Vance watched as report after report came flooding in. Outposts, archives, secure black sites, all either hit or gone dark. This wasn't revenge. This was a campaign, and it had already begun. "Sound the alert," Vance said. "Full mobilization, no more shadows." "You think they're coming for Earth?" Captain Monroe asked. "No," she whispered, "they're coming for the truth. And if we don't give it to them," she looked at the stars, already burning with distant sparks, "they'll set the whole galaxy on fire to find it." Chapter 4. The Ash Rebellion. The Ashburn didn't strike like a fleet. They struck like a memory. Across the galaxy, monuments to peace were turned into grave markers. Accord embassies, diplomatic outposts, neutral trade zones, each hit with precision, then broadcast to the stars. "This is not terrorism," the Ashburn signal declared. "This is history correcting itself." The message was signed not by a name, but by a symbol, the mark of the Ash Rebellion. To the public, it was confusing. To veterans, it was terrifying. That mark hadn't been seen since the Burning Rift campaign, back when Terran soldiers carved it into the steel of ARC's warships as a promise. "You will never forget us." Now it had returned, and the galaxy was remembering fast. At the edge of Accord space, the Valath Accord Tribunal convened in panic. Dozens of species, each with conflicting fears. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others called for diplomacy. A few those with longer memories simply stared at the Ashburn's emblem and said nothing. Then came the footage, a hidden feed from a black site vault on Delta, Trine captured by Ashburn infiltrators before they detonated the facility. It showed counselors authorizing the abandonment of Veen 4. Long before the ARCs arrived, it showed humanity's pleas ignored, and it showed Accord ships nearby retreating, rather than intervening. The truth spread like wildfire. The Ashburn weren't lying. The Council had abandoned Earth's colonies, and now, the bill was coming due, on a repurposed dreadnought, hidden in a dust ring above Korea's V. Dax Ryle met with former Terran generals, AI tacticians, and defected ARC's warlords. "The Accord is fractured," Ryle said. "The ARX are wounded. The galaxy is ripe for correction." One general scoffed. "And who decides what correction looks like?" "You know," Dax replied, "history does. I'm just its fire starter." They called themselves the Conquered of Ashes, not as rulers, but as witnesses. Witnesses to a truth the galaxy buried. Witnesses to a war that never truly ended. Back on Earth, Admiral Elena Vance watched as public support for the Ashburn began to rise. They weren't seen as terrorists by everyone anymore. They were seen as avengers, as those who remembered what the Council tried to erase. "We're losing the narrative," Monroe warned. "No," Vance said grimly. "We already lost it. Now we're fighting for something else." "What?" "Control of the future." In the void between systems, a new signal echoed. "We were forged in fire. We do not seek conquest, we seek reckoning." The Ash Rebellion had begun, and across the galaxy, worlds were choosing sides. The ruins of Outpost Varin weren't just old, they were forbidden. Built during the First Accord Wars and buried after the Veen Uprising. It was meant to vanish into myth, but now, its databanks were lit again, cables torn from walls, consoles humming with stolen life. A team of Ashburn engineers stood around a central pillar, one, not of Terran design. "This predates the Accord," whispered one. "No, Dax," Ryle corrected. "It predates everything." The device pulsed, slow and ominous, a relic from the Architect Water time, when memory was weaponized and civilizations erased by forgetting. Humanity wasn't just bringing war, they were unearthing ghosts. In the Accord capital of Velsera, Councillor Tirana stood frozen before a display of classified footage, leaked by the Ashborn. It showed not Terran atrocities, but Accord archives, erased transmission logs, redacted, colony aid responses, and falsified ARC's peace agreements. "They're not rewriting history," she said. "They're revealing it." The room fell silent. Suddenly, she wasn't a politician defending order. She was a survivor of a lie. On Earth, Admiral Elena Vance paced the command floor as incoming distress signals poured in. "A Van mining colony was hit," Monroe said. "Then a Ciari relay tower. All attacked, then freed. Accord guards, stripped of weapons, civilians unharmed." Vance narrowed her eyes. "This isn't a conquest," she said. "It's a campaign of memory, sir. They're not trying to kill the Accord. They're trying to expose it." The Ashburn weren't just broadcasting truth. They were using it in system after system. Once loyal colonies defected not out of fear, but out of recognition. They remembered the silence, the abandonment, the way the Accord protected peace by burying suffering. Now, those buried voices were rising, and they were armed, deep in the Procyon Drift. The Ark's Dominion launched a counterattack, brutal and sweeping. But the Ashburn didn't meet them in open battle. They bled them. Guerrilla strikes, viral sabotage, psychological operations that turned warlords against each other. And in every wrecked Ark's flagship, the same message was carved into the steel. "We remember, back on Earth." Vance finally spoke the words she'd avoided since Veen 4. "We're not fighting to save the Accord anymore," she said. "We're fighting to decide what replaces it." Because in the silence of forgotten history, the future had begun to scream.